The Shepnaz podcast begins now.
You're listening to the Shepnaz podcast. Here at Shepherd Church, everything we do here is to connect our community in a meaningful relationship with Christ. I'm Joe. I'm your host today. Today, we will share the first of two episodes from a conversation that I was fortunate to have with Ben and Katherine Radcliffe. They serve as medical missionaries at Papua New Guinea. When they are back in the States, they consider Mount Vernon, Ohio, their home base. So now, let's join in my conversation with Ben and Katherine. Thank you for joining us today.
It's our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Why are you in Papua New Guinea? What are you doing there for people that don't know you at all?
Yeah.
And whoever wants to hit it first, Ben, Katherine, whichever.
Well, kind of how we ended up here is we're both doctors. I'm a general surgeon. Katherine's family practice doc. And when we were looking to go to the mission field, this is the only Nazarene hospital where the church is still sending missionaries from North America. And so we thought this might be where we ended up. And I also had some strong connections. I grew up here as a missionary kid. My parents served here at the hospital for almost 33 years. And so I grew up in the house that we now live in. And God opened a lot of doors and directed us along the way. But we ended up back home for me. And that's the short answer.
Mm-hmm. All right. So now I guess we'll get into the longer answer now, is that somehow you met up with this woman. And, in full disclosure, I'll tell you how I came across the two of you. There was no particular magic, I don't think, but I went to the Nazarene website and I was looking at missionary profiles and thinking of, who could we highlight and who might we be able to talk to. And I was looking at some of the pictures on your profile and reading your newsletters and so forth. And I you know what? This looks like a family that our church can really relate to. I saw the kids and just kind of some of the activities and stuff that you had recorded in the newsletters and so forth. And then I thought, yeah, this might be, and I knew nothing about your background, nothing like that. And I said, but I think these would be people that would would be our next door neighbors. And so sure enough, as I reached out and find out, oh, well, there is a serious connection to this area, specifically to the Mount Vernon area. And I don't live in Mount Vernon, actually, since I know you're kind of familiar with the area. I live down in the Hebron Buckeye Lake area, so I'm not too far away from the Mount Vernon area. But my wife and I went there. Our 4 kids have gone there. In fact, our youngest is still there, and my daughter-in-law's there. But well, tell our listeners why I might be talking about Mount Vernon so much. I guess that goes to Katherine.
Yeah, Mount Vernon is my hometown. I was born and raised there, and my dad taught at Mount Vernon Nazarene University for really his entire career. He taught philosophy there, was the only philosophy professor there for many, many years. He passed away, unfortunately, really suddenly in 2020, and developed a really sort of severe cancer and died very quickly. Within about a month of actually getting his diagnosis, he passed away in September of 2020. But yes, Mount Vernon is home for me. And so my mom and my brother are there. And actually, Ben's parents now have left this house. Ben mentioned that he grew up in this house. So the place where we're sitting right now here in Papua New Guinea is where Ben grew up, which is really cool. But now his parents live in Mount Vernon. He also has a brother and sister-in-law there, and another sister there, actually 2 other sisters there, and family there. So we have lots of Mount Vernon connections, and it is our home base when we go back for home assignments, which is very cool to be able to be with lots of our family all at once and not have to share time in different states necessarily, and just have lots of good family time all together. Yeah.
We're proud Buckeyes. We did all of our training, medical school down in Dayton, and then our residency in Columbus. So we're Ohio.
We know we found the right people.
born and bred, for sure. Yes.
Nice. Well, I hope you'll find this story endearing. So yesterday I was out to lunch with my family for Father's Day, and I mentioned that we were going to be talking today. And so I was like, Lincoln Stevens was her dad. And I was like, so does anybody have anything they want to share? Because I know somebody's had them for sure. And my daughter-in-law mentioned a story, and then my daughter said, she said, probably the story that sticks out the most for me for that class was when he was trying to do a philosophical analysis of a Miley Cyrus song, "We Can't Stop." And so
that is just classic. Yeah. My dad liked to take things to the edge and beyond the edge. That was just classic Lincoln for sure. And he will be remembered for it forever. I know.
And always tried to tie things into what was happening in the world around, to philosophy and other things. So he was always good at that.
He loved his students. He loved to teach.
I hope you find that story endearing. So his memory is on.
Special.
So tell me a little bit about, a couple things. You decided, Ben, you had mentioned that your dad, you grew up in this house. So I would imagine that you kind of view yourself as like more from Papua New Guinea than the United States, I would assume. I don't know. How does that feel for you?
It kind of depends on the day and the situation. There are some things about the way I see the world that I know are very PNG and are definitely from having grown up here with a combination of cultures influencing my worldview. And there are other times where, because of family life and socioeconomic status, that I'm American. And I kind of feel like I get to walk in both worlds. And sometimes I don't feel at home in either one. And that's kind of the weird thing about it. They call us third culture kids, right? Because we don't fit in our parents' culture and we don't always fit in our host's culture. But for the vast majority of the time, it's a real asset to be able to see things from an alternate perspective and not get too bogged down in one area. And so, I know that I'm from here and this is home. And I also know that, Ohio is home, and embracing the challenges of all of that, but all the good stuff that comes with it too. And I really feel like it's prepared me well to be a missionary and also to be a parent of missionary kids.
I think we see that same tension a little bit in our kids at times.
Yeah.
So we have 5 children. Our oldest, Simeon, is 11. And our youngest, Luka, is 3. So I think we see that, where is home? Where are we from? We see that sometimes in the transitions from here to there and there back here. And that can be a little challenging to maneuver at times. Yeah.
And I can relate. I certainly can't relate to live in a what we would consider a foreign place, but I grew up as a pastor's kid, and so there's some relation there as far as having kind of that ministry in the family and not knowing exactly where the lines stop between, when you're in ministry, when you're doing family stuff. Would you have any words of encouragement, having been both a missionary child and a missionary parent? Would you have any words of encouragement for either side of like how to balance that and how to make that work?
Yeah, I think I remember my parents talking to me about their call and how their view that as long as I was under their roof, that call also applied to me. And I remember not loving that when I was a high school student. and then when I got to be on this end of things, I realized that the way they included me in what God had called them to and in their ministry was an incredible gift that I had been given. And I hadn't appreciated it at the time. And so we try to be really intentional about including our kids in what God has called us to here and in the ministry. But at the same time, I always am careful about how I talk about it to them. Because I don't ever want it to be a burden to them, and for them to feel like they're carrying the weight of that calling. But I want them to be able to look back on this experience years from now and see how God used them and how the Holy Spirit was able to work through them even as kids, and then as they get to be teens and as they move on from this place to wherever God calls them to next, that to realize that He's present in the journey and is always doing something if we have the ears and eyes to see what's going on. And I'll freely confess that I haven't always had the ears and eyes to see what's going on. But there are times when the Lord's pulled back the curtain, or years down the road, I've looked back and gone, oh, well, that was really good that I had that experience, or that my parents ensured that I was able to experience that, even things that were difficult. So, yeah.
Nice. I really appreciate that. And I think what you're saying there is universal, not just to missionary families, but, to families of pastoral staff and so forth, all along the way, when you find yourself in that family and you kind of see the inside out of ministry. There's many times that kids will resent that after years, and you see some people turn away. But obviously, your parents did a great job, because not only did you appreciate it, but you decided to follow in the same path. Tell us a little bit about how their calling became a calling for you individually. Yeah.
Oh, Catherine and I always laugh a little bit about this, because people always assume that, I shouldn't say always assume, but often the assumption is that since I grew up as a missionary kid and the son of a surgeon, and I became a surgeon and we're back on the mission field, that, this was kind of this preordained thing. And if you'd asked me when I was a junior in high school if I would ever be a missionary, I'd tell you, sure as heck, I'm not going to be a missionary, and there's no way in the world I'm going to be a doctor. And my senior year of high school, I wanted to coach basketball and teach high school history. That's what I wanted to do with my life. Those were my two passions, basketball and history. And I wanted to be back in America and live in the States. And I was kind of done with being a missionary kid. And I had chosen to do an elective for my senior year history on the history of Christian missions. And I was reading this book called From Jerusalem to Irian Jaya that was tracing the history of Christian missions. And it got into this chapter on medical missions. And I was reading about this single missionary doctor who started a huge hospital in Vellore, India. And I remember sitting in my room in this house where I would do I was doing correspondence school at that time. And I remember I didn't hear a voice, but I remember crying and feeling like the Lord was asking me, if I ask you to do anything, then will you be willing to do whatever it is I ask you? It wasn't a specific call at that point. The Lord had used a story about medical missions to soften my heart. And I said, yes, Lord, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. And I remember over the next several weeks, I ended up changing my major. This was like in the spring of my senior year, switched to pre-med, not sensing a call to career missionary service, but sensing a call to be obedient to whatever God had next for me, and to possibly doing that. And feeling like I'd always had an interest in medicine and liked it, but I was stubborn enough and wanted to be my own person and not do what my parents had done.
Sorry, we're having an earthquake right now.
Honestly, are you okay?
We're all right.
Mm-hmm. Just trying to decide if we need to get our kids out of the house.
I think it's calming down. We have lots of smaller earthquakes around here all the time, and every now and then we have some decent sized ones.
That looked like a pretty decent sized one from here. I don't know what it looked like from there.
It was not huge, but not small either.
I'm surprised one of our kids hasn't come out.
It's all right. They're sound asleep enough, maybe.
Usually one of them will get up. Could you see it? Could you see it shaking?
Oh yeah, actually, well, I honestly I thought maybe one of the kids was still up and was kind of like bumping the table that you had your computer on or something. Oh my goodness, yeah, I could definitely see it.
We haven't had one of those for a while. Sorry.
So for the people listening to the podcast, you definitely need to check out the video version. We do record the video so that you can see the earthquake that happened in the middle of this podcast. Oh my goodness.
I tuned you out then for a second. Then I was thinking about the earthquake and whether I needed to
go get the
jet
kids
back
out
to the kids. I think we're good.
Oh, so just before we started recording, for everyone that's listening, I was asking him about, some prayer requests that we'll address at the end, but definitely we're going to add to the list your safety from earthquakes, because that didn't come up with the list of things that we talked about.
Yeah. New Guinea's part of what they call the Ring of Fire around the Pacific, and so lots of volcanic activity and a fair number of earthquakes.
Wow.
For all of you young parents, July 16th is Child Dedication Sunday. This is a time to publicly declare your intention to raise your child in a way that will help them learn about Jesus early, directing their feet to church and their hearts to God's Word.
Well, definitely, that was one for the books. I've never seen an earthquake on video that was happening. Wow, that was pretty amazing. Not
it's
so
actually
much.
We have an effects department here. We rigged it all and set it up ahead of time.
Yeah. Oh, I honestly
we wanted to make it big for you, Joe. We really did.
I was not going to say anything because I was like, it's the dog or whatever. I was like,
oh, it's really funny.
Oh my goodness! Well, I'm glad you can see it as funny. I mean, when you told me what it was, I was like, because it's like it was going like this on the camera.
I could hear our mugs on the shelf clinking, and I know which things to start looking at on the walls, and I was starting to think, oh gee, I don't want to leave here, but I kind of want to go hold my things against the wall so they don't fall off.
We were like a couple seconds away from like getting up and going and getting the kids and
getting
out of the house, but it wasn't quite.
Yes, and certainly you can just close this and walk out. Don't feel like there's any sort of commitment here that you have to stick it out.
I kind of want to look back at the video and see at what point I was eyeing Ben to see when I should get up.
Well, I have to say you guys were really cool with it because it wasn't until you told me what was happening that I knew what was happening.
Oh, that's funny.
Good.
And then, of course, when you said it, I was like, "That's what that was." Because it's definitely moving. You'll enjoy seeing the video.
That's funny.
This would be something great for you to be able to post and share so that you can let all people know that follow you that you got it on camera. So,
that's
all right.
good.
Okay, so we were talking about something before the earthquake came, and we were talking about your call to ministry, and you had shared that you were first feeling kind of a generic call. God had softened your heart to the idea of through a story of medical missionaries, and then you changed your major. So pick us back up somewhere around there.
Yeah. So during all that process, I was getting to know Catherine. She was a year behind me at Mount Vernon, but we were in a discipleship group together, and we're just friends for a number of years. But both of us were pre-med. I had a fair number of friends in common, but hadn't dated or anything like that. And even before we had started dating, it was in one of the spring revival services at Mount Vernon. I don't remember what the sermon was on, but I remember going down and praying. And for people who have been at Mount Vernon and had been in the religion department, Dr. David Kuby was down at the altar praying with me. And I remember feeling, not hearing a voice again, but knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that, I thought, I'm going to do volunteer mission work, and I'll go do mission trips, and, I'll use medicine and my resources that I'll have as a doctor to kind of help out in that way. Because I had seen the benefit that was to missionaries, seeing people come and help out at the hospital here, and my dad would get a break and all those kind of things. But I remember saying the Lord clearly saying, well, that's not what I'm asking you to do. I know that's kind of what you thought you were going to do, but I want you to be willing to do this for the rest of your life, if that's what I want you to do. And I remember surrendering that to the Lord and saying, okay, it's okay for me to do what my parents did. And I can still be me, and I can still be my own person. But Lord, if this is what you're asking me to do, then I'm going to do it. And it wasn't until after that Catherine and I started dating. About 6 months after that. I think the Lord had to get my mind right, because Catherine had said yes to the Lord's call to be a career missionary long before I did.
Yeah, I actually knew. I mean, I was in grade school when I knew that I was going to be a missionary. Missionaries coming to Lake Holm Church of the Nazarene and Mount Vernon, setting up their slide projectors in our little chapel. And the Lord got a hold of my sensitive little heart, probably like at the age of 8. And just, it was started as a curiosity in other cultures and places, and just knowing that there was something there for me. And then that grew into me thinking I would maybe be a teacher on the mission field. And then in high school, the Lord really steered me toward the sciences. And I thought, oh, Lord, that's going to be hard. And he made it pretty clear that medicine was what he wanted me to do. And I questioned that a little bit and thought I knew that something else would be a whole lot easier. And I wondered if that was the right path. But I also felt really, really certain that was what he wanted for me. And so I started pre-med at Mount Vernon, and started that discipleship group with Ben, and we were good friends for a while in college. And I went to my sophomore year of college, went to a ladies retreat, and sort of in that same way that Ben had that revival experience. It was a really just sort of simple, not a big deal kind of thing, but just a small service that we had in a ladies retreat. And it was one of those moments where I felt the Holy Spirit asking me to be fully obedient. And was I willing to fully surrender and just give every yes to him? And in that moment I did. And so from that time on, I felt like I knew that no matter what, I would have to continue that daily yes to the Lord. And he has been faithful despite challenges, difficulties getting into medical school, all the hoops you have to jump through to do the difficult things on that path. But the Lord helped us in the midst of it, individually and as a couple too, and has brought us to this point.
We hope that you've enjoyed the first part of our conversation with Ben and Katherine. In tomorrow's episode, we will conclude their conversation. After getting to know them a little today, tomorrow we'll hear about their work in Papua New Guinea and how God is working through them. As always, if you would like to reach out to us, you can email podcast@shepnaz.org. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, and keep up with everything up to date with Shepherd at shepnaz.org. For Ben and Katherine, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.